So apparently I heard that they were making another Scary Movie sequel, in addition to the Scary Movie franchise. That deeply concerns me. I was hoping we see a satisfying end to these awful parody movies that turn out to be a toxic waste dump of comedy, but when they announced that they're making a Scary Movie 6 and it's in the works as we speak, I died a little inside. Because with a constant trend of movies, of like old sequels being released from older franchises that are like at least a decade old, or for some reason getting rebooted or getting it in addition to that franchise, and unfortunately, Scary Movie 6 is going to be a part of that. Which means if it becomes popular and it reaches gold at the box office, that means they're going to make more of this garbage. And on top of that, the Wayans brothers are the ones that are making the 6th movie. And that also concerns me, because they're at their absolute worst when it comes to comedy. I'm very concerned with the fact that both the Wayans brothers at their worst in terms of comedy and this sub-genre spoof that's coming back. Two of which should not be together in the slightest, that are actually being brought together once again because Hollywood demands it, or nostalgia of people demand it. I don't know what's scarier, the fact that that's happening or that Trump is in office again. I'm not saying that parody is a bad use of comedy. In fact, it's one of my favorites. Both parody, satire, or spoof, all that, when it's making fun of something, I love that stuff. It's fun to poke around common tropes and cliches that are often used in popular genres, as long as they can be used in a funny and clever and thought-provoking way. And there are plenty of movies that have introduced that way of comedy and have been regarded as one of the best in terms of comedies. It's just that these line of movies are an absolute waste of thought and should be buried within the sand where they belong. Not the sand, the ground mausoleum where they belong, because they are dead on arrival, long before we even knew they were even on arrival. Now, despite these movies being the absolute garbage that they are, the funny thing is, this style of comedy has been executed pretty well over the years. In fact, it started off pretty damn well. One of my favorites among the bunch are movies like Naked Gun starring Leslie Nielsen, Kentucky Fried Movie, and Airplane. Let's talk about them individually. Naked Gun is kind of like a parody on cop movies, like Beverly Hills Cop or Lethal Weapon, like buddy cop sort of thing. And it kind of pokes fun at the tropes that those movies are known for. But they do it in a clever way that doesn't really stray away from the story, even though the story is fairly simple to follow. It still manages to be funny enough so that it could keep your eyes on the screen. And mostly because Leslie Nielsen's performance in the movie and his comedic genius really puts the movie at its best. Kentucky Fried Movie isn't exactly like a linear plot type of movie, it's just like a series of skits, but mostly centered around the exploitation period. Like, if you're familiar with like sexploitation films or blaxploitation films, it's all there. And it's just all in a series of skits. It's like watching SNL, the movie, with a lot of boobs. But it gets the point across in terms of how the exploitation period was very, very prominent when it came to doing their work. And this kind of makes fun of that in a way. And finally, Airplane. Airplane is like an exaggeration of like a rom-com. When a character is going to Great Lakes to find the love of his life, even if it means leaving behind his old life. And in a ridiculous fashion in this film, kind of shows that exaggeration and just keeps bringing more of the absurdity without even really trying to stray away from what the tone was when it started. So even though it is kind of absurd, you can still kind of follow through with it because it's just that damn funny. And then when the 90s popped up, the Wayans brothers kind of took the mantle with this subgenre of comedy after their debut and success in Living Color. Then they came out with a film called Don't Be a Menace to Society to South Central While Drinking Your Juice in the Hood, as well as Scary Movie. Don't Be a Menace was basically making fun of all those movies that talk about being in the hood, like Menace to Society, whereas Scary Movie was obviously making fun of the horror genre. Both were pretty successful when they first came out, and it definitely showed that the Wayans brothers had a clue as to how to make people laugh in this sort of subgenre. But then they came out with Scary Movie 2, and it wasn't as great. But then they kind of went on to doing their own thing. But even without them, this sort of subgenre still kept going on its own, with Scary Movie 3 and 4, ironically only making things worse. And then Date Movie, then Epic Movie, Meet the Spartans, The Vampires Suck, Disaster Movie being the absolute worst out of all of them, and it ironically ended up being the one movie that pretty much caused all of these films to be exiled from theatrical releases. And honestly, I feel like that's for the good, because these movies just only got worse and worse as time went on. Now, the Wayans brothers, as bad as they are today, were excellent back then within Living Color. It's one of my favorite skit comedy series I've ever seen, next to Will Ferrell's rendition of SNL. But it wasn't just the Wayans brothers. It was Jim Carrey, it was David Allen Greer, Jamie Foxx, and just to name a few in terms of great comedians. And it's awesome to see like where they started is ironically where they were at their best. And like I said afterwards, they did Don't Be a Menace to Society and actually showed that they proved that can make comedy movies just as well as they can do comedy skits, and as well as Scary Movie. And again, Scary Movie 2, while I don't think as good as the last two films, it at least shows that they care about what they're doing. But then their later movies came out, and it seems as though not only are these movies are getting worse somehow, but it seems as though they care a little less about the comedic value of as what they're bringing to them and just bringing shock value to a very bad level, and it really pisses me off. And based on the last trailer that I saw for their latest film, things only seem to be getting worse.
A stripper and exotic dance are different. See this? Plie, releve, ass on face.
Please don't do that.
Thank you, brother!
I understand there's an audience for these types of movies, especially when it comes to the Wayans brothers, seeing how popular they are, no matter how crappy their movies get. But it just concerns me as to how they managed to have a career even despite like all of the amounts of a crap they don't give with their movies anymore. It makes me miss those times within Living Color where they actually did care and they actually put effort into their skits, into their comedy. But it doesn't seem like it's going that way, and it only seems to be getting worse. And the fact that there's another Scary Movie installment with them involved with it genuinely scares me. It genuinely makes me think that we're gonna come back to this sort of BS genre, if you can call it a genre. It's kind of an insult to call it a genre. That would insinuate that it's a film, and that's an insult to films to me because of how bad they are. And with how bad the Wayans brothers are now, it's just becoming such an all-time low that we're gonna put ourselves through, that Hollywood's gonna put themselves through to make it seem like they can't do any better than what this is. And the reason why it worries me is because it's going to make money. It's going to hit box office gold no matter what the result is. So even if it sucks, people are going to see it, and then that means Hollywood's going to make more of these crappy films. And it sucks. It really sucks to know that this is the all-time low we're going to hit, and that's what's going to ruin films. Like any brilliant, awesome comedy that might come out in the future is going to be pushed to the wayside because we got to make room for this bullshit. And it just really makes me sad. Like, nothing against the people that actually work on these films, that actually have to make ends meet in terms of their living situation. But I really hope this movie flops, because that would be the best thing for Hollywood at this point, to move on from this and just leave it behind. Unless they actually make it to a point where they actually care about what they're doing, I want this to end. I want this to end now. I just hope that Jordan Peele's next movie, that ironically has Marlon Wayans as a starring role, will suffice better than any of what's going to happen.